What's going on, everybody? This is George Khalife, and it's episode 28 of Let's Grab Coffee. I'm here with a good friend, Cassy Aite, who is actually a peer of mine in university, so Telfair School of Management. Cassy is the co-founder and CEO of Desk Nibbles, the best way for offices to actually order snacks, beverages, and much more. Desk Nibbles is trying to make things healthier for offices, for their employees. But Cassy has a very cool story, very cool background as an entrepreneur of different ventures, but also did a bit of sort of venturing in the corporate route, which we'll talk about. So very excited to have you, Cass. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Friend. Cheers, man. So look, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a bit about your background. What's the kind of story of Cassy Aite?
So I'd always been entrepreneurial, and I have a younger brother. We're only 2 years apart, and we've always worked on different projects together, different ventures, and we just like building and solving problems. So probably the earliest venture we ever started with was we were 12 years old, or even younger than that. I think I was maybe I was 10 and Emil was 8 years old. And we lived on a busy street in the west end of Ottawa, and we would fix bikes for all the kids in the neighborhood. And then for passerbys, whether they had like a flat tire or whatever, we would change their tires. And then Emil was also selling Gatorade on the side while I would do this. So we were always working on different things together. From there, we built a hedge touring business with hundreds of customers that we served across the west end of Ottawa, which we sold that business when we were about 16 years old. And then we ran a Kickstarter campaign selling a piece of software. And I think from an early age, we both really enjoyed business. I went on to study business with you, of course, studying finance at the Telfair School of Management. And then Emil went to go study computer science at Carleton University. So we worked on a number of different projects along the way, and a few others throughout university, and profitable businesses, great little businesses that we ran. And then after graduating, I think we realized the importance, both of us, of working in a large organization where we can learn from more experienced people.
Yeah.
The one thing that we always, I think the kind of things that we really enjoy doing are solving problems and learning a lot. So we're huge fans of infinite learning. Barry Diller is a strong influence of that. He's an amazing entrepreneur. You should check him out if you haven't heard of him.
For those listening, who's Barry Diller?
Barry Diller. So Barry Diller is a founder. He has invested in many different companies. He's one of the founders of Fox. And after that, he's invested and founded, I think, 20 or 30 businesses that people have heard of. He's got an amazing podcast too that he was on with Reid Hoffman.
Okay.
Anyway, amazing entrepreneur. So we look up to that mentality of infinite learning, and so we were looking at when I graduated, I went to go work in big consulting. I worked for EY in IT risk advisory. So that was in Canada.
In Canada first? Okay.
In Canada. So I was in Canada in the Ottawa office, and I was there in the IT risk advisory practice for almost 1.5 years.
Okay.
And then, at the time, I was learning a lot, really enjoyed it, and learned how processes work in large organizations. I learned things to do, things not to do. It was just a great experience. And then from there, my girlfriend convinced me to move to Austria, Vienna, Austria. It's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And ended up working there for an Italian IT consulting company. So it was a company growing at an incredible pace. Not huge for a consulting company, but very large for a research center. So we worked with universities across all over the world, actually, about 90 different universities. We worked on projects with some of the top organizations across Europe. And there were about 300 people, or let's say about 200 people, and then I was there for, again, almost 1.5 years, and by the time we left, we were about 300 people. So incredible learning experience. I worked in sales, doing outbound sales, managing Germany and Austria, alongside a team of people. it was an amazing experience. And then Emil at the time, he graduated and went and he worked for Shopify, and he worked for the government in various departments working on some really cool projects. So we always had that entrepreneurial passion. And just before I left to Germany and Austria, we came up with this idea because Emil was working at Shopify and he saw all of the great snacks they had in the office. And then we also saw there were a few companies that were trying to help companies like Shopify to order these things to the office and manage the office kitchen.
Yeah.
But we saw that they weren't taking, that nobody was taking an intelligent approach to actually ordering things to the office. So we took this kind of software approach. We built a chatbot that employees can talk to. It understands the needs, who's vegan, kosher, halal, gluten-free, et cetera, in an office. And based on those dietary preferences, all we need to know is your budget, and then you're going to receive an order every week or every month within your budget that meets the needs of all of your employees. So we're on a mission to make offices healthier and happier. And since we started about 1.5 years ago, I've moved back here in January as the business has grown. We're now about 20 people. We have customers across Canada and in a few cities in the US. We broke the $1 million sales mark just earlier this year, and we have a very exciting future ahead of us. So.
Wonderful, I love it. Let's sort of, take a step back and I guess talk about when you had the idea for Desk Nibbles in mind. You and Emil being your brother, but also co-founder of Desk Nibbles. When you first sort of had that idea, what was the biggest tipping point? You said Emil was at Shopify and he noticed that there was a bit of a gap. What was that tipping point? When did he kind of call you up and say, Cass, let's do this. What do you think of this idea?
So we always talked about it. I always had it in the back of my mind that I'd have to move back for the business at some point. And we talked about it. It was just a matter of how long it would take. I suppose the tipping point was we were always laser focused on sales and sales process and making sure that we're talking to the customers throughout the sales process to understand what ticks, what's important, and then that would also help in terms of, from a product development perspective, what to focus on. Because as a startup, you only have so many resources. When you're focusing on what to build for the customer, you really have to be focused on building something that's valuable for them. So I think we started to focus more and more on that. And as we started to understand the sales formula and we started to understand what we were building, then we realized what kind of opportunity we had. We started to realize kind of that there was product market fit at the end of last year in 2017, and we just went for it essentially.
So you kind of, I guess there was a lot of tests and trials as you went along because you didn't want to assume what the customer wanted, right? But in the sort of early days, like when you originally kind of came up with the concept, I think this would help a lot of founders listening. Was there a bit of you imagining what this is going to look like? Did you talk to clients beforehand? How did you kind of approach sort of the design phase of what Desk Nibbles would look like eventually?
So it's difficult. I think there are two ways to start a business, really, or there are a few ways, but let's say the two most common ways are and things are always going to change, is you build the product before you actually get sales. Or I think the approach that's probably more interesting and is the one that you see that's more common, that other one is a little bit more rare because you need money to start and to pay people and to build that product. But then you'll see businesses where you build the product or service in tandem with your sales, right? So with selling, and I think that's it's a great approach to take because you're never going to know that whatever you're doing resonates with your customers unless you go out there and you're trying to get sales. So I see so many entrepreneurs out there that young entrepreneurs, especially that try to, or let's say first-time entrepreneurs that try to start a business, they don't focus on sales. They say, I'm going to build a product. You know, I did the same thing. I had a business called wiseguysdedge.com. And what we were doing is we were trying to build this sports aggregation website. We poured thousands of hours into it. We had a team of 3 developers and you know, five content writers. And the idea was we were going to take all of this content, we were going to take all of this data, we were going to aggregate it, and we were going to sell it to sports gamblers, sports gambling websites, media agencies, or media outlets, and we were going to do some really exciting stuff with the data. But the thing that we realized after 12 months of developing is what we were building doesn't mean shit unless you actually try to get $1 from your customer. Yeah. And that's really what dictates, you know, what kind of value you're giving to your customer at the end of the day and what you're building.
Right. And it's interesting. I mean, you sort of have a tech component to Desk Nibbles, but unlike many entrepreneurs that we know, obviously in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and across the world, I think tech has become such a prevalent word associated to entrepreneurship, right? It's almost like you almost assume that if someone's an entrepreneur, you know, they have an app or they have a site, a platform, e-commerce, there's some tangent to it. You do have a tech component, but the basis of what you're offering is not necessarily technology. Why go that way, and what was that motivation for you?
So there's so many, a lot of people forget that you can create a great business without tech.
Thank you.
Or you can create a great business without raising VC money. And
Can you just repeat that really quickly? I think a lot of people need to hear this.
Yeah, so you do not need tech to create a great business, and you do not need venture capital to create a great business.
Amen.
And in a lot of cases, it's actually, you know, the opposite. Like a lot of great businesses that you see are service businesses. They're businesses that, you know, don't raise any capital, and maybe they take debt, and they find other ways to finance their business. There's so many different things that you can do that when it comes to fundraising, that like it's just ridiculous to me how many people go after VC money. They'd be infinitely more successful creating a business without it. But it can be highly effective in certain scenarios.
It has scenarios where it's important.
Yeah, not every business is going to be a Facebook, but for those opportunities where you can build a business like that, that's you know, a great way to go. But
so for Desk.
But yeah, so for Desk Nibbles, it like we started as a service business, right? And largely there's a service component attached to it.
When you say services, that means I'm a company, for example. I'm looking for one of your box plans, which is, you know, a box full of different snacks, and that kind of changes depending on what you want to select. When I order it, you're sort of servicing my offering, and that was it, right? That in the beginning days, that's what it was. Okay.
So going to an office, stocking the kitchen, bringing snacks, bringing food. So we still do that. Now we offer the kind of stocking as an added service. Okay. And then, you know, basically we're connecting with different partners to fulfill orders to customers across North America. Yeah. And so now we're taking more of a kind of marketplace approach. So it's more scalable, let's say. And so you'll see like there are a lot of really great companies that are built as a result, you know, starting as a service business, and then they realize, hey, we have this great opportunity where we have tens of thousands of people coming to our website, but because we're a service business, we're only able to service, let's say, you know, 6 customers per month.
The ones you work with, yeah.
Yeah, whereas, you know, you might think, okay, well now if I transform into a kind of a product business, then now I can serve, you know, thousands of customers a month, right? So it's an interesting model to see a lot of entrepreneurs that I think are really smart take that approach, especially if you are an earlier entrepreneur. Like there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have the luxury where, you know, or they're experienced and they're able to take those risks and go for the moonshot in the early days and build this, you know, great tech product business. Sure. But yeah, so I mean, a consulting business can be, even a consulting business that is a service business and depends on your time and effort, can be a great business because, you know, it's just a different lifestyle and a lifestyle that might fit with a lot of people. But anyway, Yeah, like there's. I'll give you an example. One great book I'm reading is by Rand Fishkin. It's called Lost and Founder.
Okay.
And so Rand, he talks about his experience of starting this SEO consulting business in the early 2000s with his mom. And so they had this business, they were $500,000 in debt, and then they ended up transforming the service business into this highly scalable product business selling this SEO software. And so now today I think they're doing about $40 million a year approximately in sales. And it's just it's an amazing book. I recommend it to any founder. It's one of the great ones I've read recently. But yeah, it talks exactly about that.
Now tell me something, Cass. I mean, especially in the early days, right? I think every founder entrepreneur is going to go through this, where you have to decide what roles you want to play, right? I mean, it's very obvious. Like if you're more into business and marketing or negotiations, or you're a good presenter, likely you're to be the face of the company and you're going to be the CEO. But that sort of role splitting, I think, is always a question that comes up. One, like how to actually split the roles, but two, how to find right teammates, right? I mean, right kind of early on partners. It doesn't have to be a co-founder. It could be a partner later on. How do you sort of structure that from your mindset, and what kind of pieces of advice would you give someone? Because I know that's really important.
So okay, that's a great question, and I think a lot of people miss this because they don't actively seek out to understand what their weaknesses are. So one thing that I'm always trying to do is ask for open feedback and make sure that you're totally open about understanding what are your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Because that will help you to understand what to focus on in the early stages of the business, and maybe where you should focus in the future and how to build your business. So as an example, I don't have great engineering knowledge and knowledge on how to build a great team of engineers. Emil is a great engineer. He's a great communicator. He is a good leader, and I'm lucky that I have him to manage our developer team. The technical side.
Yeah.
Another thing is that I do have this sales experience, but at the same time I realize that there are probably better people out there that are better than me to manage the sales team. And so as the business has grown, I was more involved with sales in the earlier days, but now we have a great sales leader, Marcus, who leads our sales team. Same goes with marketing, same goes with logistics, and same goes with design. And so really you have to understand where your weaknesses are early on, and then that will help you understand the team that you need to build around you. The one thing that I'll say is that if you're going to build a venture backable business, 9 times out of 10, if you are planning on being the CEO, most of the things that you enjoy doing, you probably won't be doing them anymore, because your role is going to be building a team, managing that team, having an overview kind of over everything, fundraising, and it's...
A lot of the admin stuff, by the way, as well. I mean,
yeah.
I think we talked about this previously over coffee, not on a podcast, but we were sort of talking, and I think entrepreneurship is very romanticized, right? I mean, it almost looks so glamorous, but the thing people tend to forget that yes, you do, you have the luxury of your time, and you're your own boss, and there's so many advantages really that come with it. Also following your passion, but even that passion that you define as maybe your venture, right? For you, Desk Nibbles, your role in that passion is going to change, right? So, and I think there's different co-founders for different stages of business. I mentioned this last time, there are some co-founders or founders who are really good at ideation, i.e. they come up with these great ideas. Some are better at execution. So actually, incorporating the business and, starting with a client or service, actually getting it up and running. Some are better at getting it from 0 to 1 million in sales. Some from 1 to 10 million in sales, etc. And then, some are just operational founders where they can actually really operate the sort of the day-to-day of the company, but then they might have to step aside and say, you know what, I think it's time either for me to look beyond this or partner with someone who can take it to the next level. So that being said, how do you almost battle with your ego, right? I mean, not that I think everybody has an ego a bit, but especially if it's your baby, right? Like this is something that you've been working on. How do you wrestle with it yourself, and when do you know when to pull back on certain things? Like what kind of conversations do you have with yourself to say, you know what, I think someone else would be better suited, or I should take a step back here as a leader?
I think you just need to talk to a lot of people, talk to the people that know you best. And then I would physically, one of the things I've done is like physically make a list of the things that you're good and that you're bad at. Are there things that as you grow you should be focusing on? You know, you want to have the greatest impact on the business, and that might not necessarily mean that you're doing that one thing. Like, for example, like I managed bookkeeping for the longest time with Desk Nibbles up until maybe last month. No, I didn't like it. It sucked. You know, I would spend maybe 2 full days a month doing bookkeeping, and then another full day closing the month off, doing analysis, kind of month-end closing stuff.
But
and then on top of that,
you had to do.
Yeah, things I had to do, and like I had to do them at the beginning, but I probably held on for too long, and I could have delegated that to someone else earlier. And so I realized how much time I was spending, and I kind of looked at like, you know, I could spend this time with customers, I could spend this time helping motivate my team, I could spend this time working on strategy. Like there were so many other things that were more important for me to focus on. So you know, we outsourced that, right? But you know, you have to really be conscious and open-minded about what the best use of your time is. So prioritization, like crazy, so important. And maybe that's like you should always be prioritizing like crazy, regardless.
And for you, is it like a to-do list? Like do you wake up in the morning and say, you know what, these are the top 10 priorities I have to do?
Yeah, every Sunday I'll do a calendar audit and I'll look at what are my upcoming meetings this week, what's important, what should I focus on. Every morning, I'm up at 6, 7 a.m. and the first thing I do in the morning is I look at, okay, again, what do I have to do today? What are the highest impact things I can do? I have a to-do list that basically gets updated. I've got my goals for the week, for the month. I've got my goals for the year, and those do change. It's incredibly hard to kind of like gauge even 1 year out for a fast-growing startup where you want to be and the things you want to do, but it's important to be conscious and think about those things actively. Yeah,
versus being reactive and so on.
Yeah.
You raised a bit of financing for Desk. Can you tell me what kind of financing, why, how'd you do it, ups and downs?
So we looked at the business earlier this year, kind of planning, and we were thinking how much faster could we grow, or how could we 10x revenue? And we said, well, we have this sales formula that's working. If we could pour a little bit more money into this, could we increase sales by X amount? So we said yes, definitely, certainly. So what is that amount of money that we can take, and how can we put it to work? And so it wasn't, we wanted to avoid going down the VC route or kind of angel route yet, because I mean, you don't want to dilute yourself, right? And if we had the ability, where we were lucky enough to be able to service that debt, so we took a small amount of debt from BDC, and that allowed us to grow. It was about $250,000, and that allowed us to grow a little bit faster. So it was, it worked great. It was a great option, and since then we've pretty much doubled our revenue.
For a lot of the founders listening, I think that's a great idea. I mean, there are alternative sources of capital. It doesn't have to be equity financing. And I think venture debt actually is becoming more increasingly important. You're seeing the big banks do it, RBC, BMO, TD, CIBC, they're all kind of getting back into the venture debt space. Espresso Capital is a popular firm in Toronto, and so on, so BDC as well. So it's interesting you took that route. I mean, Desk Nibbles has had really positive growth.
Yep.
Right, and you mentioned early in the podcast from 0 to 1. That's very difficult to do. Okay, and I think the thing is, man, in entrepreneurship, and I get caught in this myself. It's like, we'll only look at companies with 2 to 5 million, and we say it so often that we often forget, maybe from the investment perspective, how difficult it is to actually get to 1 million, let alone like $10, like sell something for $10. Like it's actually very difficult to do. And I think for a lot of founders watching this, sometimes they underestimate the amount of effort it takes, the branding, like thinking about churn, recurring revenues, all these things. What would you say are maybe 3 lessons that you've learned from getting to 0 to 1 that you can kind of pass off?
If you're not embarrassing yourself, then it's not too early, number 1.
Yes, sir.
So like what we did in the first, let's say the first year of Desk Nibbles was so embarrassing. Like it was just looking back at like what we were offering customers. It's crazy that any customers would ever want to talk to us. But I think because we're young, we were passionate about what we're doing, and we were working towards a solution for the customer. We were so focused on them, they wanted to listen to us and wanted to support us, right? So I think since then we've really built up a pretty valuable offering for them. So
it's kind of, before you continue, I like Reid Hoffman's quote is, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you've launched too late.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. That's exactly it. Like, I mean, even today we'll launch different features and different things that we offer to customers, and they can be embarrassing.
But you're trying. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Risk to see some
exactly, and like it's you need to find out earlier if what you're doing is actually valuable to the customer. So talk to customers, so important. So yeah, that leads me to the next one, which is, talk to customers early. What would they pay for? There was a great I forget who quoted this, but they said that they would go to customers and they would ask them. I think it was the 2 brothers that started Stripe. So they would go to customers and they would say, okay, how much would you pay for, or would you pay $1 for this? Okay, now what would we have to do for this for you to pay $10? Now what would we have to do for you to pay $100? Now what about 1,000? Now what about 10,000? What about 100,000? And so they learned very quickly, like, okay, what kind of value we can bring to the customer. So continuously talking to your customers and your prospects, and just getting out there, super important.
Yeah.
Do it as early as possible, even before you have a product.
Okay. Interesting. I like what you said about actually going to the customer, because a lot of times you assume, right? And you're emotional to your product or service, and so you think you know what customers want, but you probably have no idea. Yeah. The other thing, I can't remember what podcast, I think it was a Scaler, or some entrepreneurial podcast. They were talking about going to a customer and saying, look, think about a utopia, okay? No sandbox, no limits, nothing. If I am to tell you that I want to build this for you, give me everything you can possibly imagine it doing for you. And then let's reverse engineer. Let's take it back from there. And I think, because so many times you place limits. And especially I found this personally, like when you work with technical co-founders, it's not that they have the same dreams and visions that you do, but because they're coding, they know almost the parameters of what they're playing in. I find sometimes in business, like, especially with the creative mind, you're coming like, almost like you're like Elon Musk shooting from Mars, and you forget that you still have to build, a spaceship, test it. You can't just send people to another planet, right? Like, and so I think that's sometimes where we get caught, because I'm always thinking ahead and like the future. They just tell me, George, look, we still have version 2, buddy. You're thinking of version 25. So just relax.
Start small, right? So I would say like those 2 things, super important. Otherwise, you just got to do it. You just got to go out there and do it. Like
the hustle, the hard work.
Yeah, like don't be the hustle, the hard work. Like you're going to work hard, but it's going to be highly rewarding. I've probably worked over 100 hours a week since I was, 16, 17 years old. And I love it, right? Like,
can you tell me a moment where like you really applied the hustle? I want to sort of contextualize what we mean by it, because I think it's such a templated thing to say. I don't mean like, I don't mean it this way. I more so want to say it from like an entrepreneurial lens. Yeah. Give me an example of that hustle, but also that paid off. Like, what did you emailed a prospect like 1,000 times, or you stood out there with cookies or a cup of coffee, like something like that. Do you have a story like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch. Like sales is a really, like in sales, we are, like we have tons of cases where the sales cycle has taken a lot longer than normal. And finally that prospect comes through and it's like, a big deal. And you look back at the history in your CRM and you see like, I had 30 phone calls, 50 emails, been following this prospect for over 6 months. Now the deal closed, and it's like that's a great feeling to have.
Especially if you're hungry, like if you're sort of chasing, after so long and doing all the right behaviors, like that's what sales really is.
Yeah.
And I'm taking a sort of a sales course right now with Sandler, but that's what they call it. Like sales is really doing the right behaviors to get to the right outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think if you sort of overlook those behaviors, people they'll sort of or dismiss cold calls. They'll say like, oh, that just isn't going to work for my space. You don't know my space, George. There's no way cold calls are going to work. And then you start doing the right behaviors, the follow up, the persistence, and look what happens, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's tough. Like you work hard and it pays off, but I suppose you have to be mindful of like, you should relax and take times to relax too from time to time, but enjoy yourself, right?
How do you do that? Like what's your sort of system of kind of winding down, because this is also your business, right? And so that's even more difficult. It's not like you just go turn off the lights and that's it, right? I mean,
yeah, it's not like you have to set. I think it's important to set some kind of rituals that you have. For me, like I'll go to the gym at least 3 times a week, and that's a great way for me to de-stress.
What's your workout routine right now?
It's my workout routine.
Yeah. Like what do you do? Is the gym
so I do this routine. I've been doing a PPL routine. It's push movements one day, pull movements one day, and then leg movement, like legs, another day. And so for me, that's like it's a great, like it's automatic, right? I know my routine. I know which stations I have to do, which movements I have to do, and it's like automatic. It's like I'm meditating for that hour and a half. Right, it's a really... You
really shut off, you put on music, like...
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I love about it, man.
Put on music.
Bothering you.
Exactly, put on a podcast, nobody's bothering you.
Unless you're that one guy in the gym who has the AirPods on, like actually doing a conference call.
Yeah.
While squatting, like...
I've done that before. I've done that before.
It was Cassy the whole time.
But that was maybe... yeah, I've done that before, but I've tried to, not...
Was it getting that prospect, the 6 months? That was the last call, wasn't it?
It was a crucial moment, but now I try to make sure that those times are like just me times. And then also maybe one other ritual I have is that I try to have breakfast with my family every Sunday. Okay. So taking that time with family is important too, and making sure, because I mean I don't see my family and my parents. I see my brother every day, right? But I don't see my parents, so often. I don't see friends that often. So taking that Sunday with friends and family is important.
You just reminded me of something that I really want to ask, and I think this is a good question. But you're saying, you were saying like I work with my brother every day. The first thing that I could think of, especially being Lebanese, is this is the advice that everybody gives: is never do business with family. Like never go into business with family or really close friends for obvious reasons. Did you have that sort of challenge in your mind early on? And if so, how did you overcome it? And how do you guys operate, like personally as bros, but when it's business is business? Like how do you have that separation?
Yeah, so we've been working together on different things since we were like 12 years old, right?
Okay.
So we've always selling Gatorade and fixing bikes on the street. But we've always like worked together, and so we know what it's like, and we're like best friends, and we know each other so well. So it's amazing to have that trust. I suppose it's not for everyone, and I've seen it go bad where people aren't able to do that, right? And like sure, there are moments where we disagree with things, but we always make sure that like the conversations we're having and disagreements that we're having are always extremely logical, and that I don't even think we've had to have a mediator ever before to make a decision. It's just because we're trying to apply 100% logic to the decisions that we're making. But like from the perspective of balancing work and life, I hate the idea of work-life balance. I don't think that's true. I think like
Cass, you're gonna get a lot of comments right now on this podcast by saying that. All right.
I hate work-life balance. I hate the term. It's like so. It's so. Like maybe I just don't like the way that people think of work-life balance.
Yeah.
I don't think it means the right thing. It has the wrong definition.
Okay. So how do you define it?
I don't think it's a balance.
Okay.
It's more of a, and I think a lot more people are saying this now these days. Maybe it's like a cliche thing to say, because it's, but I totally agree with it. It's that life, like work is a piece of life, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a balance there, because I think there's a negative connotation towards work.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're going to spend your life doing something, you should at least try to be happy doing that thing, right?
Yeah.
When you're spending, a third of your life doing something, right? Make sure that you're doing something that you're excited to wake up and do every day, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's incredibly important.
Just on that fact too, I just want to say, like, I definitely agree with that. There's actually research, obviously, that shows people who retire, but still have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be something as simple as like gardening, or I don't know, sitting on a board, but doing something and having, like when you wake up, you have a purpose, right? You have some intention, you're likely to live longer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is an even easier example. If you ever went to the Caribbean, you went to like an all-inclusive resort, man. So every time I go to these resorts, it's like I'm supposed to spend 7 days there, and by the third day, I'm like I'm kind of almost bored of it. Like, look, I've sat on the beach, the food is great, drinks are fine, like we had a good time, but like now I need to go back and hit the routine again. I almost feel you can just kind of you get out of it. So this whole notion of retiring and sitting on in the Bahamas for the rest of your life sounds very appealing.
Yeah.
But when you actually go to do it, I guarantee you by the 5th week you're going to be back in Toronto hitting the pavement and doing some calls. So it's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
100%.
I'm going to hit you up with to wrap this up, 2 things. We're going to do a bit of rapid questions.
Okay.
Rapid questions, not rapid questions. So I'll be asking questions, you answer quickly, and then a piece of advice for our audience. Is that cool?
Yeah. Cool.
All right, buddy. First one sounds easy, probably obvious. Favorite snack?
We've got these coconut snacks. They're like these protein coconut balls.
Okay. Like the freshy ones?
No, it's like a packaged protein coconut ball. It's delicious.
Oh, that's the one you let me taste last time.
I think I brought you one last time. Yeah, it's a great snack. That's a good one.
So okay.
Yeah.
Favorite city?
Favorite city. Depends. It's so tough.
Give me one, Cassy.
Vienna, Austria.
Vienna, Austria?
Yeah.
You're gonna go with that? We're in Toronto, man. We're filming in the 6th.
Yeah.
You're gonna say Vienna, Austria?
You got to go there. If you haven't been there, then you don't know what you're missing out on.
Right.
It's an amazing city.
I hope John Tory isn't listening to this podcast, but no, sure. Most exciting time?
Most exciting time? Tomorrow.
Nice. Most challenging time?
Most challenging time. Ooh. Let's say I would say there's no challenging time. It's in your mind.
Okay. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Building a great business.
Okay. Favorite book?
Favorite book? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Damn. I like that. I'm gonna note that down. Okay. Piece of advice. Young entrepreneur looking to start a venture. What would you say?
Just go do it. Talk to your customers.
Nike, just go do it. If you're watching this, you better sponsor this podcast.
I have it's funny, my dad, my parents are immigrants.
Okay.
They're both from...
Originally from...
My mom is originally from Bolivia
Okay.
in South America.
Yeah.
And then my dad's from Algeria in North Africa. So very different mix. But, as like having an immigrant parent, Russell Peters makes this joke. He talks about like the funny ways that his dad swears. So my dad too swears in a very funny ways. He uses words that, don't make sense in a sentence. They're grammatically incorrect. So he used to say, like when we had to do our chores, he'd look at me and my brother sitting on the couch, and he'd be like, "Guys, you're not gonna do the dishes. Just go fuck do it." And so even when
just forget the ing.
So now today when we're working on the business or doing something exciting or have an important meeting we're telling him about, to wish us luck, he says, "Guys, just go fuck do it."
So go fuck do it.
Yeah. So I tell all the young entrepreneurs, just go fuck do it.
Episode 28 of Let's Grab Coffee. I'm trying to be serious. Just go fuck do it, man. Cass, I appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.